Hi, Recap TV here. Today I will show you a fantasy adventure film titled The Stronghold. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. When he was a little boy, Vitko was in an accident with his family. Their car fell off a bridge and his father died. Years later, as a teenager, Vitko still has nightmares about it and has developed a paralyzing fear of heights. One morning he doesn't want to go to school because they'll be going on an excursion to the mountains to watch the solar eclipse, and he's afraid his phobia will kick in. His mom makes him change his mind by promising his father will always be there protecting him. Meanwhile, 1,000 years in the past, a shaman is using his magic to start a spell that will help him find the Stone of Power. The fire in front of him forms the shape of a dragon head, which matches the image on Vitko's jacket. Speaking of Vitko, he's actually having fun on the excursion with his best friend Vovchik and a toy plane he's built himself. Vitko has also brought a bunch of fireworks to light at the end of the day, and Vovchik has brought his very own megaphone to fool around with. After walking through the forest for a while, the group needs to cross a bridge to reach the mountaintop. But Vitko freezes in the middle of it because of his phobia, and Vovchik has to drag him back to the beginning. The whole class starts chuckling at Vitko for what they consider a senseless trepidation, and the reality his jeans are wet, thinking he peed himself when really it was the water bottle in his pocket. Embarrassed, Vitko runs once more into the woodland and takes cover behind a bluff. Vovchik comes after him to remind him they don't need such friends, but their chat is interrupted when the eclipse finally begins and an earthquake suddenly hits the area. Vovchik falls off the edge and holds onto the rocks just in time, but he won't be able to stay like that for long. Vitko wants to help him, yet his phobia keeps him frozen, and before he can think of something to do, a magic portal opens behind him and absorbs Vitko together with the megaphone. When Vitko opens his eyes again, he finds himself on the same cliff but in the past, 1,000 years back to be exact. Nearby, there's a man in armor called Olshko picking up flowers for the girl he likes when he's suddenly attacked by a group of enemy humans. Defeating these soldiers is easy for Olshko and his sword skills, but things get complicated when he's attacked by their leader Andako, who quickly overpowers him and brings more soldiers to capture Olshko. At that moment, Vitko trips while trying to get a better look and accidentally activates the megaphone, distracting the soldiers and giving Olshko the chance to escape. Luckily, Olshko has a horse and is able to pick up Vitko to take him away with him. When they reach the river, Olshko summons the spirit that lives there to form a path for him to pass, and this path disappears once Olshko and Vitko have crossed, making Andako and the humans give up for now and leave. Olshko takes Vitko to his village, which is protected by a stronghold that he wasn't supposed to leave, so Olshko gets scolded by the town leaders for disobeying orders. Vitko's garments and way of talking are viewed as strange by the residents, and figuring he might be a government operative, the pioneers secure him until they choose what to do. Meanwhile, Andako goes to see the shaman to discuss the failure of their mission. But the shaman surprisingly reacts happily when he hears about the boy in weird clothes. Since the dragon on his jacket matches the one in the shaman's visions, it means Vitko is the person that will guide them to the Stone of Power. Sometime later, Vitko is visited by Olenka, a young girl that brings him milk and makes sure he's doing fine. She also confirms he's in the year 1120. Before Vitko can ask more, Olshko comes to pick him up and take him to the river for a test. The water spirit will decide if he's a spy or he's trustworthy. Vitko is thrown into the river with his hands tied and for a moment thinks he's going to die, but the river spirit considers him worthy and throws him out without hurting him. He may still be seen as a weirdo by the villagers, but at least now Vitko is accepted as one of them and gets to meet the leaders properly. There's the wise elder Ovsi and, more shockingly, the fighters Ilya and Dobrynya. Putting their names together with Olshko makes Vitko realize these are three mighty bogatyr warriors from the legends. They don't believe Vitko when he says he's from the future until he uses the megaphone as proof, and when he asks for a way to return to his own time, Ovsi promises to look into it. In the meantime, Vitko will stay with Rasenka and her mother, and Olshko takes him there as an excuse to talk to Rasenka since she's the girl he's been picking flowers for. Later in the evening, Ovsi comes with some news after talking to the river spirit. There are two ways for Vitko to return to the future. He can either wait for another eclipse that will reopen the portal, or search for a mage that will teach him how to open it by force. Olshko knows where to find a mage, however he doesn't know whether Vitko ought to go on the grounds that mages put individuals through exceptionally intense preliminaries prior to aiding them. So Vitko offers an arrangement. In the event that Olshko trains him, he'll gift him his bull horn. Olshko accepts and Vitko spends a few days in the village, learning to use the sword, the bow, and just general tips on how to defend himself. He also gets to meet the Stronghold's watchtower, which is so tall that it can help them keep an eye on the whole kingdom, and Tuharin, a human prisoner that steals a pin from Vitko because he's obsessed with gifts. In return for his teachings, Olshko gets to play with all kinds of modern objects like chewing bubblegum and taking pictures with a cell phone. He also learns that in the future he's a fairy tale knight. Once Vitko's training is complete, Olshko gets the megaphone and in exchange gives Vitko a map to find the mage, although he must promise not to tell the leaders he's going away since leaving the stronghold is forbidden, and that's why Olshko can't go with him. Later that day, Olshko visits Rasenka again, using the megaphone to get her to leave the house without her mother seeing them, but she isn't impressed by the fact one day he's going to be famous. The next morning, the Cuman shaman puts a spell on a raven to spy on Vitko, who has left the village and is now crossing the forest. He isn't sure if he's following Olshko's map correctly, but fortunately he comes across Olenka while she's gathering mushrooms and convinces her to be his guide since she seems to know the area well. Without noticing the raven that is following them, the teens walk for a few hours until they enter a passage between two huge rock walls, and Vitko suddenly finds himself in a desolate land, which is an illusion cast by the mage. Vitko can hear the mage's voice speaking in his mind, asking him for a test if he wants knowledge. He must confess his greatest fear, and lying would only get him punishment. Decisively, Vitko shares the narrative of the fender bender, his feeling of dread toward levels, and the reality this dread impeded saving Vovchik. The mage approves of the boy for having accepted his own weakness and shares the information he's looking for. The stone of power that will take him back to the future can be found where the wingless make their nests, and it'll be seen when he straddles the wind. Only someone able to touch another heart with his own can do it, but this power can also spread pain and misery around. As soon as the mage finishes saying the riddle, Vitko returns to the forest and learns Olenka never noticed he had been gone. However, she does believe him when he shares his experience and guesses that the nest for the wingless must refer to Stork Village. They make it to this village a few hours later, and to find the stone, Vitko uses a kite that he makes on the spot to straddle the wind as the riddle said. The kite falls into the water, and Vitko jumps in to follow the string until he finally finds the stone of power. The raven sees all this, and as soon as the news reaches the shaman, he sends a bunch of Cuman soldiers to steal the stone. These warriors are ruthless, and not only do they kidnap Vitko and Olenka, they also kill the villagers and light their houses on fire. Fortunately, thanks to the watchtower, the soldiers at the stronghold learn about this attack and immediately send their own warriors, led by Ilya, Dobrynya, and Olshko. They beat up the Cumans easily with their superior sword skills, but there's an archer hidden in the woods that they can't see. Vitko does see him though, and he uses his own bow to get him before he can shoot a single arrow. When everybody gets back to the fortress, Vitko and Olenka are reprimanded for leaving, yet essentially Ilya vows to direct Vitko the following day so he can find where he can utilize the stone. Meanwhile, Andako is furious with the shaman since his plan made them lose an entire unit of soldiers, and threatens with killing him if he doesn't get him the stone next time. The following morning, Vitko is taken to the rock that brought him to the past, but putting the stone of power on it does nothing. Vitko thinks it has to do with the part of the riddle mentioning hearts, but Ovsi thinks they need to wait for a storm because the god that made that stone was the muster of thunder and that may activate its power. When they return to the stronghold, Vitko follows Ovsi to his home and discovers the old man is an inventor that is trying to make a flying machine. Obviously his knowledge is lacking, thus Vitko takes the chance to teach him about aerodynamics, using a paper plane as an example. From then on, Vitko and Ovsi work together on making functional wings, but Vitko also spends some time with Olenka, who shares local legends with him, including one about star-crossed lovers that leave behind a stone heart. To thank her for everything, Vitko gifts her a cute little paper bird. While the shaman prepares a new spell for his next plan, Ilya and his men manage to capture a Cuman soldier and interrogate him until they learn Andako knows about the stone, which means they need to hide it to keep it safe. Ovsi thinks the best hiding spot is on top of the watchtower, and when he notices Vitko doesn't want to go up there with him, he reminds him that confronting your fears is important and that Vitko will always have the village support to rely on. Riding the elevator is nerve-wracking, but Vitko manages to make it all the way to the top and start controlling his fear at least a little bit. Ovsi conceals the stone inside an old stone, and this is seen by the shaman's enchantment, who concludes the opportunity has arrived. A few hours later, a storm finally comes, and Olenka tries to tell Vitko she doesn't want him to leave, but he doesn't get the metaphor she's using. Soon the rain starts, including hail too, which hits Tuharin in his cage and makes Vitko feel bad for him, so he grabs some old sailcloth and covers the cage with it to protect the prisoner. Olenka is impressed by Vitko's bravery and rewards him with a kiss on his cheek. That night, a flash of lightning hits the stronghold wall and breaks some stone that falls near the cage. Tuharin takes advantage of this and uses this debris to break the lock, escaping under the protection of the rain. Tuharin travels all the way to the Cuman camp, where it's revealed he's Andako's brother, yet Andako doesn't want anything to do with such a deformed beast. The gifts Tuharin have brought for him don't impress him because they're silly things like a chicken, But Endako quickly changes his mind when the shaman notices Tuharin has also brought the Stone of Power. However, the stone still hasn't been activated and the shaman fails when he tries to use it, so he informs Endako that they'll need the person that retrieved the stone from the river to make it work. The next morning, people in the stronghold find out that Tuharin and the stone are gone. Attacking the Cuman camp would be a bad idea that would get them all killed, so Vitko and Ovsi concentrate on finishing the flying machine because it's their only hope to recover the stone. Sometime later, while Ovsi and Olenka go out to gather berries and some mud to paint the flying machine, they're ambushed by a group of Cuman warriors that kidnap Olenka. Ovsi attempts to safeguard himself, however there are an excessive number of them and he winds up injured. He does manage to make it back to the village, but he only can tell everyone about what happened to Olenka before dying. Speaking of Olenka, she's taken to Endako, who steals her paper bird and sends it with a raven as a message to Vitko. Dangerous as it may be, Vitko still decides to go alone to the Cuman camp, where he's asked to activate the stone if he wants Olenka to live. Pretending to know what he's doing, Vitko pulls out the fireworks from his bag and lights them up as he says random phrases from his English class to make it seem like he's speaking a mysterious, mythical language. Then he throws the fireworks at the soldiers to create chaos and confusion around the camp, which allows him to grab Olenka and run to the horses. Unfortunately, before they can escape, they're captured again by Endako, who gives Vitko one last chance to activate the stone or he'll kill them both. Vitko doesn't know what to do until he recites the riddle in his head again and realizes heart to heart means the magic of the human bond. He approaches Olenka and when they hold the stone together, the magic inside it finally comes to life. After the shaman takes the stone away to power up their army, Endako orders Tuharin to kill the teens, but he can't bring himself to do it because he remembers how kind Vitko had been to him. Instead, Tuharin frees Vitko and Olenka and gets them a horse, and such a gesture earns him a piece of candy from Vitko as thanks. Tuharin loves gifts and tries to impress his brother with the candy, but Endako ends up killing him for what he considers a great betrayal. The following morning, Vitko and Olenka return to the fortification and caution everybody about the approaching Cuman assault. All the soldiers and the 3 bogatyr warriors get ready to defend their home. But nothing prepares them for the sight that comes with the Cuman army. It's a giant golem that the shaman is controlling with the power of the stone. The stronghold fires its catapults, but none of the projectiles is strong enough to hurt the golem. In fact, the big guy takes one of the boulders and shoots it back, breaking the gate. Noticing how big and heavy the golem is, Olshko gets an idea and leaves the stronghold to make the golem chase him, expertly dodging every slow attack until he makes the golem trip and fall into the river, where the water spirit captures it. Olshko falls into the river as well, causing Rysanka to get worried and run to the shore to cry for him. But it turns out he's just fine and Rysanka rewards his heroics with a kiss. At that moment, a new eclipse begins, so Vitko says goodbye to Olenka and gets a horse in order to reach the rock with the portal quickly. Unfortunately, the eclipse is also seen as a sign by Endako, who orders his army to take advantage of the poor light and attack the stronghold. Under the bogatyr trio's wise leadership, the villagers defend their home from the Cuman army to the point where even the women manage to land a hit or two. Finding himself at disadvantage, Endako decides to leave with his soldiers before they're all killed. But the shaman isn't ready to give up yet. He still has control over the stone and manages to bring the golem out of the water for a new attack. Seeing the arrival of the golem even a ways off, Vitko chooses to return to the fortification and offer an arrangement to overcome it. Ovsi's words of support are still strong in his mind and help him overcome his fear, allowing Vitko to quickly take the elevator to the top of the watchtower and climb on the flying machine, which flies as smoothly as it was designed for. At the same time the golem reaches the stronghold to begin destroying it, Vitko lands on the cliff where the shaman is standing, pushing him off to his death and finally recovering the Stone of Power. Endako arrives at the cliff as well, intending to steal the stone, so Vitko throws it in the water to stop it from falling in the wrong hands and causes the golem to disintegrate. A furious Endako wants to kill Vitko for his indolence, but Olshko arrives just in time to fight him again in a fierce battle between master swordsmen. Since Endako doesn't have his army to support him this time, he falls to his death the same way the shaman did. There's no time to celebrate though because the eclipse is about to end, so Olshko takes Vitko to the forest to find the portal on the rock. Before Vitko leaves, Olenka comes to say goodbye as well and kisses him, promising she'll always wait for him. As soon as he enters the portal, Vitko is transported back to the present, where Vovchik is still hanging on the edge of the cliff. Now that he isn't scared of heights anymore, Vitko is capable of saving him, and such heroics earn him an ovation from his class. A year later, Vitko's mother surprises him with an ancient book he's been looking for since his eclipse excursion. By following the information in the text, Vitko manages to find the stone heart from the story, and by touching it, he can feel Olenka's presence in the past touching it as well. Thanks for watching video, subscribe channel and press the bell icon.